Hi everyone, welcome to Type Talks. Today we're here to talk about INTJs and music. And so Chris, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Yep, I'm Chris. I run the YouTube channel AsuraPsych. I'm an INTJ, and I've been making content on YouTube for 5 or 6 years now. I'm a psychology post-bachelor researcher as well.
Very cool. And Angelina?
Hi, I'm Angelina. I'm an industrial psychologist in the UK, and I been using Type for like 25 years, but also use Enneagram and other personality things. And I have a qualification program to train people in how to use Type professionally.
And she's the author of the book, The Shadows of Type. And Solomon?
Hey guys, so my name's Solomon. I'm a synth pop artist, and I have my own YouTube channel for MBTI and Typology. And yeah, that's about it.
Clear and concise. And Michael?
Yeah, I'm Michael, amateur. Good to be back on the channel. Looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, nice to have you on. And so, hi, my name is Joyce. I'm a certified MBTI master practitioner, and I facilitate this typology system in organizations. And I also help people on the discovery process of figuring out their best fit type. All right. And so, INTJs, what is your relationship with music?
Well, I'm completely obsessed with music, always have been, have it on at all times, even when I'm asleep. So, yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I'd say I listen to a lot of music. I don't sleep to music, but I'm definitely the kind of person who at like 3 in the morning, I'm happy to be listening to even, loud, fast tempo music right before bed.
Kind of the opposite for me. I'm usually, if I'm listening to something, it's usually people talking. But yeah, definitely. I definitely prefer instrumental music. Words, I think, in music sort of bother me, especially in English. but yeah, definitely not 24/7 listening to music for me. But I take it seriously.
Very cool. And Solomon, what is your relationship with music?
It's an interesting question. So I do make music myself, and I guess in a lot of ways, music is like a tool to like sort of morph myself into becoming the future version of myself that I see myself being. That's one relationship to it. A second thing would be like if in terms of the music relationship to it, it's really more about like the meaning behind the music itself, right? So if I'm listening to a song, it's all about the images, visual images that come to my head when I'm listening to the song.
Yeah. And so we clearly have INTJs here who have a deep relationship with music, so it'll be interesting to analyze. Something that we could go into is if there are any brave souls who want to share their taste in music, because I know INTJs can be very private about their music because it can be a very personal thing. But yeah, it might help us understand you more or even the type more. So
I mean, I can start if no one else wants to. So I grew up with a lot of kind of alternative culture, like very much like a lot of black goth culture, that sort of stuff. A band that I like very much is called the Birthday Massacre, which sounds like it would be like a really heavy metal band, but it's not. It's more like a kind of like alternative, very synth wavy kind of thing. It's hard to explain. But I like in general music that has a bit of an alternative twist to it, almost like it's speaking to the person who maybe doesn't see themselves as being like the rest of everyone else. That's the kind of music that I find myself gravitating towards. Is that growing up, I always felt like there was a degree of separation between me and my peers, and music that speaks to that is something that I enjoy. I don't enjoy music that is overly emotional. And like I don't mean just like like hey, I'm happy, da, 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 but also like the sad emotions too. Like to me, there's too much of if music overindulges in the sadness aspect, then I'm not gonna like it either. I like kind of have that middle ground where it's like it speaks about something that is emotionally relevant to me or even important to me, but also it doesn't just wallow in that, if that makes sense.
yeah, so it's reflective of your experience or how you feel, but not in an overly dramatic or cheesy or overdrawn way.
Right. Like I'm not a big fan of like emo music. If you're, you might find like INFPs very much enjoy the kind of like emo music, very like crying all the time kind of music. But to me, that just doesn't do it for me. It almost comes off as inauthentic or forced.
Then the question I have for you is, why does it feel forced and inauthentic?
I'm not saying it feels forced and that those emotions are not real, but oftentimes it comes off more like teen angst than anything else, where it feels like the emotion itself isn't like relatable to like a larger worldview, where it's like they're just wallowing in their own despair that actually isn't that bad. It's like comparing like getting a small paper cut to getting stabbed. Like there's kind of like different degrees of emotional realness in music. One example of I think emotional realness in music that I think makes a good band, and if you grew up in the 90s, the 2000s, you know Linkin Park. That's a band who you can tell they sang about their struggles. They sang about like mental health issues that they faced. You know, the lead singer killed himself. And that is something that I thought was very reflective and authentic throughout the music in that band throughout the years. So when I listen to the music that's talking or singing about these emotional struggles that don't feel like they have that realness attached to the person singing it, that's something that's going to turn me off from the music.
Yeah, that's well put. Or if it's lacking perspective, like it's wallowing over a small thing. Thank you for expanding. Anyone else?
Not too dissimilar. I sort of veer towards the sort of gothy wearing black type things. I'm very much the same. I don't like the emo stuff. I like the proper stuff like Bauhaus and things. Yeah, so the heaviest I would get is like 9 Inch Nails, Marilyn Manson stuff. I don't like that proper heavy metal, as it were. But the range is huge. So my favorite all time is like Bowie, of course. But I'll listen to cheesy disco or anything. But the music that I can't do is that sort of random jazz stuff that actually makes me start to itch. So that the really unstructured stuff, and it's weird. Unlike Michael, I don't like instrumental music quite so much. I really much prefer lyrics. So yeah, and I always like to have to pay attention to what the lyrics are.
Yeah, and what is jazz music? Itch you? Is that what the word you use?
Makes me itchy. Yeah, only that. I mean, jazz comes in various forms, and I would say most of it I don't like, but obviously there's the odd bits that are good and I enjoy. But the one that really gets to me is that random free jazz stuff. Oh God, I can't bear it. Yeah.
I actually completely agree in that I can't. I understand like if I'm in a location that's like if I go to a bar and there's just someone playing like random music, that's like whatever. But I'm not gonna ever turn on that kind of music in my own free time. I also agree that lyrics to me are something that I kind of prefer in music. My wife really loves K-pop. I don't want to say I can't stand it, but it just doesn't do anything for me because I can't understand the lyrics. So I'm just listening to noise at that point. And sure, sometimes it sounds good, but it's not gonna throw me in that land of imagination that I like when I'm listening to music.
I appreciate like experimental jazz and atonal music, 12-tone music, and these kinds of things. I mean, intellectually, definitely. I mean, it doesn't compel me to move. You know what I mean? But a while back, I got into music theory. I had a group of friends who were new music people and friends who went to conservatory near me and got into theory, and it's fascinating. I'm nowhere near an expert on it, but just I've after doing a little study there, I just started getting more interested in experimentation, paying closer attention to harmonies and different modes and systems of music. So I appreciate those things. I can't say there's some of it that I really do enjoy, but not as a genre. I think if there's anything I connect to, I really connect to in terms of song, it's like Italian song. And it might be, I don't want to be too, I mean, maybe it's nationalist, but it might be just coming from an Italian family, but songs like, I don't know, Al Di La Vivere, or even the bouncier kind of Italian songs, or like Verdi arias. Maybe it was just growing up with these, but that's probably closest to my soul in terms of song. And when I say I prefer instrumental music, I think it's just I've always been hung up about just the English language in particular, and how I just don't like I don't like hearing the English language rhymed. Which, I mean, even Shakespeare stumbled trying to rhyme this language, but Italian, everything rhymes, you know, so I've got no issue there. In terms of American music, I think probably doo-wop is my favorite. If I'm really just gonna kick back and listen to something, I think the doo-wop golden age is, you know, where probably my playlists focus. Yeah.
When it comes to music, honestly, I'm pretty okay with listening to instrumentals. But when it comes to lyrics as well, for me, it really depends what are the lyrics actually about, right? The actual content and the meaning behind it. For example, like songs that usually resonate with me the most are usually songs about like never giving up. All right, songs about overcoming some sort of odds or something like that, right? So if it's something like within that ballpark, that lane, I'm all for it. But when the music sounds like there's not really any substance to it, it's like template-y, if that makes any sense, like the type of lyrics you'd hear in pop music, I'm just like, no, switch this off. I don't want this. This is nonsense, you know? So it's just like, yeah.
Yeah, a good test is like, could ChatGPT have written these lyrics?
Yeah.
Yes, the solace in that sense. You'll find with INTJs, if you ask them questions like about music, what's in common with all the responses is a strong opinion. It wasn't like yeah, I like whatever. You know, like there is something there. Solomon talked about substance and about how he likes songs with substance, but substance can be defined differently depending on the person. So what is substantial to you in music? What gives music substance to you?
Okay, so I'm gonna cite what Jordan Peterson said about art and music here to have the point home. For example, Jordan Peterson would say that music, if you know what you're going to talk about, and I'm talking from the perspective of a person who makes music, if you know what you're going to talk about before you make it, that's not art, that's ideology. And I find that the greatest music is really something that you don't know why you're doing or what you're doing while you're doing it. And I think substance just comes out of that naturally. It was a pretty interesting concept, honestly. Really made me think about it in different ways when I heard Jordan Peterson talk about that.
I kind of like that because it really speaks to that idea that like some of the best music comes from that internal place of like, this is what I'm feeling or thinking right now, and that's being translated into the song or creation that I'm working on. And I'm not someone who's musically creative myself, so I don't have that process. So I think that's even more so why I respect it.
Right. But I would say you would even be able to feel it, regardless if you had if you were inclined to make music yourself. When hearing it on other people, you'd be inclined to feel it. And it's interesting you bring up the fact that it's all about expressing yourself in the present moment, because it's weird, because when you actually think about it, when an artist expresses itself in the present moment without trying to like be ideological, they make the type of quality art that ends up being famous like years later. You know, that's where you get that stereotype of the artist that's ahead of their time and all that. So I just find that pretty fascinating, just the concept of it all.
I mean, that's where you get like your Michael Jacksons, essentially.
Yeah.
Like, that's the kind of person that I think of when you say something like that.
Yeah, I'd say that substance, I think, comes from revealing the soul. I think music, and maybe this goes back to the point about instrumental music, that I just feel like it's the only art form that's abstract enough to make the soul sensible. And sometimes with when you add lyrics to this, I just feel like sometimes there's too much consciousness attached to that there isn't that deeper kind of revelation, even though there's obviously instrumental music backing the lyrics. But I think aside from music, maybe architecture would be the only analogous kind of art form that and I think they correlate with each other. Like the architecture of culture and the music of a culture. Like you listen to a Baroque fugue and then look at like Rococo architecture, you know what I mean? This is these are expressions of the same kind of, at least cultural soul, also for the individual though.
Yeah, I quite like lyrics when they're a bit abstract and give you something to think about. And you think, what's this about? And also when it could be about something or it could be about something else. So there's a bit of your own interpretation on it. I quite enjoy. And lyrics that, if something's too straightforward. I remember there was that ABBA song, The Day They Caught the Train. It was like, I went to the station, I bought a cup of tea. I can't remember the lyrics, but it was and I just thought, oh my God, this song's killing me. I've actually come to like it now because it's like that, because it's so straightforward. But at the time, it was just like, why has anyone written such a dull song? But I like things that are, a little bit masked, a little bit, what's that about? Or sometimes a song with a story in it. I like those. But interestingly, as everyone was talking, I was trying to think, what music do I listen to that really just afterwards I'm just like, yes, punch the air. And a lot of the time it's songs that build and they have these just massive crescendo endings, they're the ones that really like physically get to me.
Yeah, so the themes that I'm hearing is that music is a way to bypass the ego. So it's almost like if you think too much about the music beforehand, it's no longer a piece of expressing yourself. You're not bypassing your conscious mind into a more honest, authentic part of yourself. So it seems like music is a way to tap into a more subconscious or a more vulnerable part of you that needs you to bypass your overly thinking mind. So,
all right, can I say something though? Because I just remembered you brought up something that's pretty interesting. Remind me of something, which is oftentimes I commonly hear that music is something that like people in the MBTI sphere, they associate music with FI, right? They associate with that function. But I personally think that when it comes to creativity and art, it actually isn't really an FI process. It's more like an NI process, if that makes any sense. It's not a decision-making process. It's an intuitive process, a sort of perceptive process as well. And to answer your question about what makes a song substantial, so for me, right, as an NI Dom, when I'm listening to music, listening and making, what I appreciate most is when I'm listening to a song and the meaning of the song changes in different times you listen to it. So when you're hearing the same thing, you're looking at it from different perspectives, but you're noticing like subtle shades of meaning, different depths of meaning each and every single time. So I may be listening to one song, the same song, in a specific time period. It has a certain meaning to me. 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, it has a completely different meaning to me. It's the same song, but it has a completely different meaning. That to me is like my favorite part about music. That's like the pinnacle for me. And
yeah, your taste in music can change over time, and how you interpret a song can change over time too. Yeah, and it could be both things. It could be that every function has its own way to express creativity, and it's done in its own special way too. Because there are musical artists of all types.
Yeah, that is 100% true. 100% true. Yeah.
Something that I mentioned in one of your type talks a long time ago, but an observation that I noticed when listening to bands, like if I try to like type the singers and stuff, I've noticed that types with like FE, for example, in the function stack tend to sing about like their relationships with other people a lot more often. And something that I've noticed is that when I'm listening to music, that's almost never a topic in music that I listen to. Like almost none of the music that I'm interested in is about me being in relation to someone else or that communication going on between them. It's a song about the individual doing something for the individual or overcoming some sort of challenge related to the individual. And I want to say, I don't know if that's something that maybe other INTJs with FI relate to, but that's something that I do.
No, I relate to that for sure. 100%.
Yeah. And another reason why people listen to music is to seek closure. So if there's an area of your life where you don't feel like you've gotten full answers for, or almost like it's unresolved. For instance, Chris mentioned earlier how he felt like the odd duck out, or a little different or separate from the people around him. And so when you feel like, at least this is my interpretation of it, right? Like if a situation hasn't had full closure, music can be cathartic for processing a situation more fully.
I think as well, in terms of artists I appreciate, and it probably is related to that sort of quest for originality or whatever that goes with NI, is are people who are always just like doing something different, reinventing themselves, pushing the boundaries. So, you know, Bowie, Bjork, you know, even Madonna to some extent, you know, people who are always changing what they're doing, but doing something really different and a bit risque. And I mean, particularly Bjork, you never know what that woman's going to come up with next. I remember going to when she was doing this thing called biophilia, and it was where she'd created instruments that used nature. So she had these like sound things where a pendulum was playing strings and the drum machine was lightning in a cage and that. And it was just the most amazingly clever, original, little bit sciencey, which I liked, a bit of science in nature. Yeah, so I find her absolutely inspiring, even though I don't always like what she's done, like to listen to. But yeah, I would like to be her in my next life, or PJ Harvey, one of the two.
Who would you all want to be in your next life? Apparently no one.
Yeah, it's just me who wishes I was more exciting then. So, okay.
I wish I was more exciting too, so you're not alone.
I wish I was Carl Jung so I could flesh out my system more and not leave questions for people 200 years later.
That's a good answer.
Okay. I think it's an interesting point. I think like Carl Jung, the confusion there is I just feel like he got so wrapped up in alchemy that I feel like music theory would have served him better. You know,
yeah.
I feel like less I don't know, less Rosicrucianism and more like Pythagoras would have served him better. It's just end up with a lot of confusion in the end, the way he, especially the later work, right? Less Swedenborg, more Bach.
I'm just wondering if anyone else here listens to music very critically, because often when I've been at a live show or something, and I'll say to someone, "Oh, they've got the sound balance here wrong. That needs to be here and there," and they're like, "How are you? You know, why are you even concerned with that?" And I don't know. Apparently, people think I listen to music differently to most other people.
Well, I can tell you, I definitely listen to music critically, but I think that's because I produce and engineer my own music, so I have to listen to it critically. Is it like a INTJ thing? I don't know. It can be, I guess, in terms of the meaning. If we're trying to determine quality, I speak for myself at least. I don't know about the other INTJs. What do you guys think?
Just a short note on the Jung conversation. Yeah, Jung was really hard to understand. If you want to look into his works, I would recommend looking at von Franz or van der Hoop. You know, people are really serious about type when they mention those names. And they're basically easier to understand from Jung's time. They're like Jung's students.
Daryl Sharp's books are quite good as well. He sort of takes the Jungian things and makes them more understandable. So Daryl Sharp.
I've been reading Jung's, like recently, I think a couple of weeks ago for my YouTube channel, I've actually went and revisited what Jung originally meant by introversion and extroversion. I just straight to psychological types, went and read that book. I found it pretty interesting, to be honest. It was a little bit hard, but then over and over again, it kind of gets easier. But it was interesting because some of his notions of extroversion, introversion are not what we know about it now. And so, yeah.
Okay, yeah, back to the question someone asked. Do you guys relate to what he said earlier?
About listening to music critically. Do you guys listen to music critically? Not that much?
I would say yeah, but I'm also the kind of person who, like, I let other people enjoy what they want to enjoy. So, like, I'm very much like, I don't like that, but if you like it, whatever. That's kind of my deal with music. So, but I also like trash music sometimes too. So,
like, did you just say trash music? You like trash music?
Like music that's bad. Like there's music that's bad. I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but there's plenty of times where I've heard a song and I'm like, wow, that song's not very good, but it is kind of catchy.
So you like, okay, wow. Yeah, when a song is so bad, it actually starts to sound good, huh?
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason like top 20 music is top 20. Right? Like a lot of it's kind of just like reprinted garbage that's just coming straight from a factory, written by someone who's not even singing it.
Yeah, and they're all written by the same person.
But
All
the
those
people
top
who make the
songs.
beats can make good beats. So you're like, all
Yeah.
right, like I could listen to
Very
this
cool.
and not have a bad time.
Yeah.
I really enjoy it when something's got really interesting production as well. So, you know, like going back a bit, things like what George Martin brought into the Beatles songs. When someone's like, let's put some strings in here where you wouldn't expect it, or just, yeah, clever sound production, things. Just, it's always just something that's like different and interesting.
Yeah, effort. Like when people put effort in their work and their craft, I can see that, and I always appreciate that.
Yeah, and I think I listen. I definitely listen critically, and if there's something that's interesting enough, I want to know what's happening here. What keys are they working in? What meter are they working in? You know, if there's sheet music, I'll look that up. If there's analysis, I mean, the internet's great because there's so much on just YouTube, right? Of in-depth analysis of like, why is this working? Why is this strange? Why is this interesting? You know.
So what do you guys think about music that's cinematic? What do you guys think about that stuff?
Do you mean like film score music?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, obviously it's massively powerful in a film, and sort of thinking Joker, I can't actually remember what was in it, but I remember being really impacted by the choice of music and things in that film. And it's about probably the only time I really enjoy classical music. I don't mind it, but I wouldn't choose to play it at home. But when classical music's used effectively in films, it's just, yeah, completely, it changes the whole mood of everything.
Yeah, for cinematic, just in terms of film scores, if I am going to put something on in the background, it's typically I've got a whole slate of scores saved on Spotify that I'll listen to. And I think the movie score is like the natural progression of 20th century instrumental music more than concert music, which is interesting, but much more like niche and experimental.
That's interesting because sometimes music used in cinematic films or just music you hear on YouTube, also sometimes the intention is to manipulate your emotions into feeling something. Like they want to prompt you into feeling something. So I wonder how that would make you feel.
Yeah, that's like the Spielberg approach to the John Williams, you know, soaring strings or really moving melody that I just feel trying to wrench me this way or that. It doesn't work for me. That kind of just bashing you over the head with what you're supposed to feel. Or I mean, there's the like action movie conventions of, you know, the kind of action score with the pulse pumping, like Hans Zimmer, Christopher Nolan kind of score. But I think the most effective action scene in a movie in recent decades is No Country for Old Men, the chase sequences, and there's no music in that movie until the end credits. There's none.
Interesting. But that's interesting. So, okay, in response to what Joyce was saying about music tailored to prompt you to do something, how often do you guys listen to a song to put yourself in a different emotional state intentionally? Do you guys do that often? Because I find myself doing that quite often.
I do it a lot.
Yeah.
And yeah, sometimes if I'm going to a job, it's like, right, change the tune now to something lively because you've got to pick yourself up, and I try and I either match it to my mood or I use it to get out of a certain mood and into a different one.
I definitely think for me it's closer to the matching to the mood, where I tend to put on music that reinforces the mindset that I'm in. So if I'm feeling like ambitious, I'll put on ambitious music. If I'm feeling chill, I'll put on chill music, that sort of thing.
I'll typically use music if I need to focus or if I need to reset. So I'll put something on that I need to commit my focus to, and then that'll sort of, it's like if there's too much going on or I feel scattered and rushed and pulled in too many directions at once, it's not really working up an emotional state, but it's more something to just absolutely tunnel my attention into for some period of time, and then that, you know, narrows the it calms the waters a little bit, you know.
I was going to say, Solomon, I'm going back a little bit. Why did you ask the cinematic music question? Because you didn't give your view on it. I just wondered what it meant to you.
Oh, cinematic music. I also listen to. Why I asked is because I myself listen to cinematic music quite a lot, and I think it's pretty dope. Because so what it ties into, the overall thing that I'm trying to make, the point is that when it comes to music, I appreciate music that is, how can I explain? I don't want to use the word structured, but there's a theme. There is an obvious, clear theme in the music itself, so you know what it's sort of about. And I find that quite a lot in cinematic music as well.
I quite enjoy cinematic music too. One of my favorite bands right now is called Starset. I've seen them live quite a few times. I would describe them as a cinematic rock band. I mean, when you go see them, they literally perform with like cellos on stage right next to the guitarists. So I like that feeling of. Someone mentioned earlier, it's kind of like it's almost like the climax of a movie type of thing, where I like music that feels like you're at that epic moment where you feel like you're about to do something big. So.
It makes you feel like in that mind space too. So that's really awesome. And you've typed Starset before, right? Like INTP or no?
Well, I think their lead singer's an NTP, but
Uh,
I don't know.
And there are pop and rock musicians that I think have done their most interesting work, and specifically in film scores. Johnny Greenwood from Radiohead,
Trent Reznor.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, just since we're typing artists now, I personally typed Trent Reznor as an INTJ, just to let you guys know. I've actually typed as an INTJ.
Sounds about right. Yeah.
I think so too. So one of my favorite live bands at the moment is Idols, and even though they sound like really, really noisy, shouty band, all their lyrics are about sort of, social justice and caring and all this stuff. And I think a lot of people think their lead singer's INFP, but my own view is I think INFJ. So yeah, it's just quite an interesting. It's like a contradiction between the sound of the music and when you actually hear the lyrics. They're extremely like careful and caring and idealistic and stuff. So I find that fascinating when you get those mismatches. It's a bit like Marilyn Manson as well, sort of quite shouty, but I suspect he's INFJ as well. So yeah.
I think the FETI axis is much more comfortable being shouty. I think there's a reason that like STPs love heavy metal.
Yeah. I mean, I would attribute it to SE personally. I would attribute that to SE, but it could be also FETI.
I actually do a talk about the personality type of David Bowie, suspected ISFP. Yeah, I really enjoy it because I look at it from like how the personality develops and all that stuff as well through time. So that's one of my favorite talks to deliver is my Bowie talk.
Very cool. And so how do you think music and the functions intertwine? What are some of your guesses, hypotheses about the correlations between that? If you have any, or type and music, if you've had any insights around that.
I mean, my best guess would be that the hero function is the one that expresses itself through the music. That would be my guess, of course. It'd be that. Or it could just be a combination of all their functions together. I think that'll be a much more realistic analysis. But it's kind of difficult because it's like the MBTI tool was never meant to be used to analyze music and then derive someone's type from it. Although Carl Jung himself said that it's the NI DOMs who he believes were the natural artists, and the seers and the cranks and all that. So you would think that they'd be the ones most inclined to become musicians or to form creativity. But I don't think we can say anything definitively about it.
I think there must be some sort of correlation between people's types and whether or not they're writing, I want to make music that makes people dance, or I write music to express myself or for my own catharsis, or I make music to deliver a message and use as a social platform. There's probably some crossovers between that sort of thing, which I haven't actually thought it through, so I'd probably have to think about it a bit. But I should imagine that almost like the motivation between why I do the sort of music I do must be type related, I think.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. So for instance, with the artisan types, so the SP types, they're known for wanting to make an impact and wanting to have quick results and wanting to basically be able to affect something quickly. And so you can see that probably in their music too, in some people. So like making someone dance, that is a way of making an impact. So I could see artisans having a trend of that. So it's not a one-to-one, right? But that's one of the many factors that affect what someone creates. So
Yeah, I think the artisans, as you said, they focus more on the sheer performance and the craft and the ability to perform the actual skill. Where I think perhaps with the intuitive types, it's more about something that's a little bit more conceptual, like expressing something conceptual through their art, possibly.
yeah, no, I would totally agree with that, Solomon. Yeah, like you'll see in Harry Styles, I believe he has ESFP preferences, and he's really performative in how he presents his music. So whenever I have SFPs on my panels, whether it's ESFPs or ISFPs, when I ask them how they experience music, they're like, "Oh, it feels good to my ears," is what they say. And typically, that's the biggest determining factor to whether or not they like a song. It's, does it feel good to my ears? Whereas if you ask an ENFP that, you'll actually get a different response, which is they do analyze it more conceptually. So it's interesting that those are things I noticed.
I remember when I was young, I was like always playing my records in my bedroom, and I'd sit next to it and just listen to it intently. And sometimes you have the album cover back in the day. And my granddad used to live with us, and he was some sort of extroverted sensing type. And he's just come in going, "You obviously don't like this because you're not dancing." And that was his take on it. And he had his own record player in his room, and he was always playing like rock and roll stuff and like dancing around his bedroom. And that was his take on it. If it's not making you dance, you can't be liking it. You know, if you're sitting really still, poring over it. Where I was like, no, this like it's the best thing ever. I can barely move. So it's different.
Yeah, I could enjoy this with a stoic face. Don't let the looks deceive you.
Yeah.
I'll say I'm not a musician, but I will sit down from time to time and you know, in like Logic Pro with a MIDI controller and you know, just work on something. And I don't have I don't have the natural talent or the training for it, but just in terms of an activity, it's the most in the zone as I ever am. Either that or video editing, probably. Where just they're the only activities for me where time just gets sucked away and everything just feels kind of in balance. I think when it comes to functions, it's, you know, just with music as with everything else, that I think you have to, like, you want a harmonious balance of all four, right? Of all functions. And I think music should you know, there's so many genres of music that lean far in one direction, and there's it just feels shallow, you know. But I think the most interesting and not necessarily complex technically, but the most the kind of music that has the most depth is tapping into something where there is that kind of synthesis or that balance, that harmony between different functions, different levels of experience. But I will say, I also like music that has a sense of humor. Like I like, I mean, one of my favorites over the last few years has been that little demon Poppy, who's like in a very eccentric like YouTube videos and kind of a you know, kind of a backstory and some handlers that sounded kind of unpleasant, but musically has developed from this kind of bubblegum pop kind of you know, satirical music into like this alt metal kind of hard driving music, but with really dark but self-consciously dark kind of lyrics and imagery, and also with like sunshine pop in there too. So I like that, something that's just kind of wild and has a sense of humor about itself is fun.
I like Weird Al's music.
I like to have fun too. Yeah.
What
Yeah.
about going to see live music? That's something I do a hell of a lot and really enjoy. And once again, I don't tend to dance about unless it was like Chemical Brothers or something dancey. Like to really like just stand there and listen and watch what all the musicians are doing and stuff. Just wondered what other people do with live music.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I like live music. I haven't been to anything since before COVID, but I used to go to a few concerts, and I was the same way. I always found myself kind of being like a wallflower. Like I would just be in the back of the room or somewhere near. Like to me, I didn't need to be up near the band to see them close. It was more so just kind of like getting to experience that thing I've been listening to 20 times a day for the past year in person, and seeing how it differs, that sort of thing.
I just don't feel part of crowds, and I just when I'm I always feel out of place at a live show if there's a lot of energy and a lot of just the mob working itself up into a fever. It's I like to kind of disappear in those in those situations.
Yeah, I'm also not really a big, huge fan of live concerts as well. That's not something I go to.
Yeah. Well, if you want to find an INTJ at a live concert, look at the areas where it's not overcrowded.
Yeah, I like to go and then move into some space that's not so it's not populated.
Yeah.
I think that's part of the reason that I actually like going to gigs on my own, so I can move around and keep sort of changing where I am to find a place that seems comfortable for me.
Yes.
But I really do lose it if I'm stood behind people who are talking louder than the band. I'm not assertive ever, apart from that. And then I'm just like, I'm sorry, can you see the band? Yeah. So I need to keep moving, changing position, and yeah.
Yeah. Whereas you'll have the ESTPs who want to be at the center of action. So they're like, yeah, I want to be right where all the chaos is happening. Put me there, right there. Because they feel alive there. All right. Well, thank you, INTJs, for giving your takes on music and for showing us your personal world of what makes music meaningful for you, and for also showing us the range of music that you guys listen to. So words of affirmation may not be the top language for many INTJs, so I will keep my endings a little brief. But yeah, I'll have everyone's channels linked below. Thank you for your wonderful contributions, and I'll see you all in the next video. Take care. Bye.
Thank you.